All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your next episode of The Brown Perspective. Romero, how are you?
¿Qué pasó, mano? I'm here, surviving.
Started from the started from the bottom, now we're here, huh?
Just surviving this impeachment process.
That's right. So we have at least four topics that we want to cover in our conversation today. We're gonna, of course, talk about the impeachment process. We're gonna talk about the Democratic debate and the candidate race. Actually, there's been some developments on that recently. We're also going to talk a little bit about Bolivia. There's been a lot of, well, a crisis in Bolivia, but other parts of Latin America and Chile, Colombia. So there's certain going on. There's something in the water, both here in the U.S. and the Americas in general. And lastly, Black Friday is upon us. The cherished American tradition where we spend all of our money to show people that we love them. I mean, Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, I got confused there for a second. But of course, there's some things that Romero and I wanted to discuss with you all, at least explore, share, um, to make sure that yeah, we talk about those topics. And actually, we're excited because we're getting our act together, and now you can follow us on a few social media platforms. We'll get those up next episode. But if you are so inclined, you can follow us on Twitter at the Brown Perspective. You can also follow us on Instagram on Brown Perspective now. So now you know, and we look forward to getting your comments and messages moving forward.
Sounds good, man. I'm glad that we are expanding into the world of social media beyond Facebook. Should we
I know
should we get a an account with TikTok as well? Make a
we
few.
should, even though I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
a
what the kids are into now.
that's interesting because I had no idea either, and if it wasn't for my cousin's 12-year-old that
Hmm.
we had dinner a few weeks ago and they were on their phone and it's not even they didn't even tell us. It's not even like we asked them because they live in their own world. They're little kids. They're just sitting next to you and they're on their phone. But because I do have a background in technology, I'm naturally curious as to what apps they're using. So I'm not
Yeah.
completely detached from that. So I said, "What app are you using that's taking up so much of your concentration?" Because I knew it wasn't Snapchat and I knew it wasn't. Maybe I thought it was Instagram, but then they
Mm.
said TikTok, and I was like, "What is TikTok?" So that was the first time I heard about it. So that's when you know that you're getting old, when when all of a sudden an app has gone viral with teens under what 18 or 19, and you have no idea until months later when it's already established.
That's funny. Yeah, I know it's because I've seen some videos. I know that it's part of what the youth is into, but I guess we can perhaps in the next episode we can talk a little bit more about that trend because I would love to learn more because I haven't seen it. I don't know what it looks like. And when I hang out with young people, I just assume they're watching YouTube
The,
videos as they used to.
well, it I was looking into it too, and it at least from my perspective, because I'm not using it, but and I didn't use Vines either. But TikTok
Mm.
looks like it's very similar to the Vines app, but with music. So you make these videos and there's music on it, and I think there's music that you can use that's copyrighted, so you can just use it and then do some video over it, and that's like the big appeal of it. But a lot of it is there's a lot of overlap with what people were already doing in Vine with Vine. Was it Vine or Vines? I think Vine may have been the name of the app, and then Vines were the collection of videos that were created.
Hmm.
Anyhow, sorry, we went a little off track. Just a little excited here that we're still managing to stay up to date with the latest apps out there.
That's right. Trying to. And I know part of the challenge of keeping up with topics is that we're always so busy. We have lives going on. But I think something that a lot of us cannot miss is the fact that we're sort of going through this constitutional exercise called impeachment. So, Romero, I know that even though you and I try to be informed and up to date on what's going on in current events, I know that the impeachment proceedings have moved forward. So, wondering, what your view, what your thoughts are so far of what you heard or have been able to investigate so far.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, and maybe even a little bit less, because from my perspective, this is all political theater, and I'm not hooked onto the television watching all these things because at the end of the day, I don't believe that they're going to be able to remove him. You can drag on impeachment proceedings for a long time, if I understand correctly, and long enough till a year and a half when he may not even be elected again. So I'm not following as closely, but I do know that it's happening, and I know the salient points. And again, the way that I would frame this is let's do a little deep dive into the circus to see what
Okay.
to see what's going on. And right, so we know that at the heart of it is essentially, was there a quid pro quo, meaning that I give you something, you give me something with Ukraine when Trump was withholding military aid. And I think that this article actually does a pretty good job of summarizing it. Was Trump withholding military aid to Ukraine to pressure the government to investigate a claim against Biden? And if you follow that thread with Biden, you start getting into Hunter Biden and his role in the board of an energy company. I forget what the name of the company is.
I think it's Barisma or something like that.
Burisma Energy Company, which, and I do recall because I was driving and I was listening to the news, and I do recall that they had someone on the stand and they were asking them specifically about Hunter Biden and what was his involvement with this energy company, and they were essentially insinuating that, or trying to get at the root of whether or not Hunter Biden was actually qualified to be in that board,
Hmm.
or may he have been placed there just because of who his father is. So you
Yeah.
could definitely go down that rabbit hole, and there's probably a lot of information that is being kept from us. So, but what sticks out to me though is this headline here that says that Trump was trying to pressure the Ukraine to investigate a baseless conspiracy theory. Now, this is Business Insider. So,
Hmm.
this is their point of view. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a very common uh, that is the talking point that you see in a lot of mainstream media, that this is a baseless conspiracy theory, and then they don't even bother to explain it to the public. But when I look at this and I say, okay, well, they're not even trying to explain why it's baseless. I bet
Yeah.
you if I actually dug into this deep enough, I would find that there's something that is shady going on there. Not necessarily because I know that Joe Biden is a politician that would put his son on a board for some to get some leverage or some advantage. It's just that that's just the way politics works,
And the
right?
way privilege works too. So I
Yeah, and the
think
way
that's the
privilege works.
interesting part
So,
of this whole conversation, that it sort of highlights some of the way that power and privilege play themselves out both in politics and in business.
and right, and then so when I hear that they're trying to impeach Trump for, well, let me parse that a little bit. So when I hear all these complaints about Trump based on the things that he's doing, my reaction is always every single other politician does stuff that is very similar. It's just that all of a sudden, because Trump is not part of the establishment, they want to get him out. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying I'm a pro-Trump guy. I'm just thinking objectively about these things. Now, what they are trying to get Trump for is essentially the quid pro quo, and that they have it on tape, or that they have some evidence of it, because even that in itself is not unique to Trump. There's been other presidents that I'm sure have pressured other governments to do things. It's just that with Trump they have it. So the question is, are they going to have enough just to get him just based on that? I don't think they
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, and I don't well, we'll find out, right? And I think it's also a matter of perspective, like you said. And I think you talk about the mainstream media, and I know more and more the mainstream media is divided between those who are conservative and those who are liberal, or those, sort of the CNNs and the Fox News of the world, or MSNBCs, I guess would be the more um, accurate name. But I think, to your point, one of the main difference here is that there's a policy perspective, right? Because I think even though there's been this is something that the U.S. and previous presidents have done in terms of pressuring countries and other entities to follow, to do what's in the best interest of the American government and American companies. I think what one of the things that's very different here is that it sort of deviates from the policy that was. So in some ways, the policy, even if it's biased, there's policy and there's an understanding that this is going to benefit the country as a whole versus it's going to benefit the president and in his upcoming presidential race against one of his rivals. And I know and to your point, I know there's a lot of people that and and I think part of me says, well, so what? That's kind of politics. But I think there is a differentiation. There's a very fine line that it feels like a number of Democrats have felt that this current administration crossed.
because it was for personal gains, for personal
Yes.
gain, as
Yeah, it was
opposed
a
to
yeah, it was a personal gain in terms of get me dirt on a on my who seems to be one of my main political rivals, in this case Joe Biden. And I think the other um, one of the things that the baseless conspiracy that you highlighted may be referring to is a conspiracy that it was Ukraine who interfered in the 2016 elections, not Russia. And I
well,
think that that was the investigation that I believe um, Trump and his administration wanted to get them to do. Like, what was the role that Ukraine played
right.
and perhaps some of the misinformation campaign that happened and they lead up to the 2016 election.
Yeah, that's the point that's new to me. This is the first time that I hear about now Trump claiming this. What I will say to that is that this everything we hear with regards to Russia and Russia meddling in our elections, there's no proof. There's no concrete proof that Russia ever did it. But they talk. You could easily claim. You could easily put here that the baseless claim that Russia interfered in our elections, the same way that they're putting it next to Ukraine. So, from my point of view, there might be something to Ukraine having played a role, especially because Ukraine has more of a connection with the United States. We've been more involved there, destabilizing that country and so forth. So, again, look, whatever the media is presenting to me, if they're saying it's baseless, or if they're giving me, or if they're telling me that something was done, like Russia interfering in our elections, I'm not seeing proof either way. I'm not seeing proof of how this is baseless, and I'm not seeing proof of Russia meddling in our elections. Concrete proof, not hearsay, not possible reason why, not something that may point to motive. None of that stuff. I'm looking for concrete proof that would stand up in an actual trial somewhere. So that doesn't exist. And so,
Yeah.
sorry. And then going back to what you were saying about Trump, I do agree that in this case it's different because either Trump was careless and he didn't follow the same protocol that other politicians follow, so that if they get caught, there's plausible deniability. For example, look into that connection between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and that board. There's something that was given there in return for Hunter being on that board that directly benefits the Bidens because they're getting paid for that. They're getting influence. They're getting something that is directly benefiting his family, it seems. Because if it's not benefiting his family, then why not put somebody else there? He's putting his own son. So see, but Biden did it in such a way that he can claim that it's not. The difference here is Trump is I don't want to call him stupid, but maybe that's the part where he's not your typical politician, that he does some of these things in a way that puts him in the direct line of fire in the event that he gets caught. That's the only difference I see. So yeah, so they can get him because he shouldn't have been doing this to further his own agenda or for his own personal purposes. And since he did, now they have something that they can go after him for.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, think to your point, part of it is because Trump is not a politician. I think he is running or operating more like a business person. This is my interest. This is what I want to do. I want to do it. And I think politicians often have to your point, they do disguise it a little bit better. But I think something that you said that's interesting because there's so many facts, so much information. So it's interesting. So I guess my question to you would be, what kind of evidence? Like, how do you want to see that evidence? And also, like, this is really a trial in the court of public opinion, and I'm wondering how many people who would have the time or dedicate the time to say, okay, this is all what I know about the Bidens. This is all I know about the actions that Trump did. What's right, what's wrong, and how do I come up with a conclusion of who's right and who's wrong? And obviously, a lot of that's going to be driven by the narrative that sort of wins the day. But I guess my question to you, because my understanding, and I mean, I haven't seen any reports, I haven't read anything. I know there's a muddler report that's out there,
Hmm.
but I think some of this information is classified. What I do know and what has been reported is that there was consensus across all of the 10 or however many U.S. intelligence agencies that the Russians did mingle or that they tried to interfere, just like the U.S. has interfered in other elections across the world to advance their objectives. So I guess wondering like how do you how would you like to see that proved? Like, would
Right.
you like to see like an article, or do you want to see like a video presentation, or how do you think you and others can get that type of concrete proof that you need to make an informed decision?
They could start by showing us actual evidence because I do recall that one of the claims that they made against the Russian investigation is that they had proved that the IPs that had been used to hack some of the, I believe they said voting machines, which, by the way, voting machines, a lot of them aren't really hackable or connected in such a way that they could be hacked. But anyway, let's just go with that. Let's assume that these IPs that they claim were used to hack into, or maybe it wasn't the ballot box machines actually. Maybe it may have been the servers that were hacked, the DNC servers. They said that these IPs came from Russia. Okay, but that doesn't prove anything. The fact that an IP from Russia was used to hack some server in the US has nothing to do with whether or not the Russian government did it. It may have been Russian hackers, or it may have been agents inside Russia doing it, and so the IP shows up from Russia. So see, when they offer that type of proof, most people might think, oh, yeah, by association, it came from Russia, definitely Russian government. No, that's just people's biases. That's not proof. And so, see, here's the problem that I have, right? And I don't I don't feel like this intentionally. It's not like I don't want to believe. What was it you said? All there's a consensus from generals and from the establishment that Russia hacked our elections. I want to
Yeah.
believe them, but these are the same people that told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. So how I don't understand. See, you're asking me how it is, why it is that I don't believe that these people, what they tell me. Now,
Yeah.
I'll pose a question to you. How is it possible that you can believe the same establishment that has repeatedly lied to you to get us
Hmm.
into war? Like you guys seem to forget all that stuff. And then like a
Hmm.
few years later they tell you what they think is going on, and then we just believe them, take it at face value, and we don't even question them. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so now where's the evidence? I say, well, IPs don't prove anything. And IPs just
Hmm.
an identifier to some computer that came from Russia physically there that could have been anywhere. It could have been in the border of a city or a town in Russia that borders another country. So you have people from outside the country. Anyway,
Yeah. And you're a technological guy. I'm sure there's ways that you can make an IP or take over an IP to make it seem like it's from there, but it's really being controlled or done from
yeah,
somewhere else.
there's a lot that can be done. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't want to get too distracted with the Russia allegation, but again, going back to the Ukraine, Let's talk about again the impeachment, because what you said is true. If they have evidence that Trump on a phone call was saying, "I'm going to withhold funding until you look into my opponent," if they have, and they do have a phone call, don't they? But there's like they're trying to parse the words. There's like
Yeah.
a gray area. What exactly did Trump say in that phone call?
So it was a conversation with the newly elected president, and what he said, I believe, they talked about a range of things. I think he mentioned how happy he was that they got rid of the previous ambassador to the Ukraine, who was an Obama appointee, who um, who I guess they had an issue with because in part she didn't want to ask the Ukraine for the investigation that they were looking for. So I think there was a piece of that, but then the other concrete thing that he asked, it was, and I don't have the exact words, but I know he said, well, I need you to do me a favor though. Like, we're really concerned, or we're interested in learning more about what Hunter Biden's and the Biden's role what was in this this issue, because their argument is that because of Biden, while Biden was the vice president, they got rid of a prosecutor that was trying to dig dirt on Hunter, his son. So I think this is kind of like where the crux of the Ukraine issue is, and why the Republicans are saying, like, why aren't you investigating the actions of Vice President Biden? Um, and why are you investigating what the Trump administration is doing? And I think that, to complicate things, Ukraine, like many other former Soviet countries, there's a lot of corruption. So the fight for corruption, which is something that is official American policy, is what sort of what drives that, right? Like, a lot of U.S. aid, a lot of U.S. help is predicated on the fact that you need to work towards preventing corruption, and obviously, I guess corruption can be in the eye of the beholder in some ways. Um,
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but mm, I don't want to get too much into that because I don't. I've never believed that we are in other countries interfering because we want to root out corruption. We're in there because it serves our personal interest, and if there's corruption, as long as it serves our interest, I think the U.S. is okay with it because we can point to many countries where that happens, and we're okay with it because these are allies, right?
mhm.
With Ukraine, we also the United States played a big part in destabilizing that country back in the 2013. I think it was before 20, the whole coup that threw out the president of Ukraine, and that was part of it was because we were involved. I mean, there was a phone call at the time that was. I don't want to get too much into that. Get distracted.
Yeah,
The,
but then Russia invaded, and right, so they invaded another country and annexed a part of it.
well,
And whether or not the U.S. should be involved,
but
obviously that's up for
did
debate.
Russia really invade though?
They did.
But
They they took the whole peninsula of Crimea,
they had a
and there's still a war going
no,
on
but
between Ukraine and Russia.
there was a referendum in Crimea. Russia didn't invade. The people voted to secede. See, it's all about how you want to portray it. it so so the U.S. in numerous occasions has backed a specific group seceding from another country and forming their own territory because it favors us. The Crimeans decided to secede from Ukraine. Now, I'm sure there was Russian involvement there, and they even encouraged them somehow. But at the end of the day, the people decided to do that. It's not like Russia invaded the Crimea and just took over. Anyway, uh, look, that's not the whole story. That's like one of just the highlights of it. How what we get in the news is slightly different than what actually happened. We could have a whole discussion on that. So I am aware that I'm also just giving like a very superficial viewpoint of it. So,
Hmm.
but let me get back to this to the natural gas company with Biden, to the Burisma Holdings, right? And so when I asked you earlier, is that they had a phone call. So just reading this, it did jog my memory a bit because I do recall that they don't have the transcript of the phone call. There's knowledge that a phone call happened where Trump repeatedly pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden.
Well, yeah, there was, because I think the call was transcribed, and after the call was transcribed, it was placed in a separate, more highly um, I guess, safe because of the Trump
Contents.
administration. Well, content, and because the Trump administration lawyers felt that it was sensitive enough to do that.
Have
But
they
I think,
released the transcript though?
yes, I think
Oh,
they've
so we should
released.
be able to find it, right?
They should be able to, yeah. It's been released, and it was, but this is the thing. I think
That's a rough
then there
transcript.
was,
That's not a
yeah.
transcript. Sorry.
So I think they were trying to you know, prove that like how accurate was the transcript, because apparently there's some things that perhaps were not completely um, that
What?
were perhaps adjusted or
But see,
changed.
that's no longer a transcript. Then that's the problem, right? They either release the full phone call, or if somebody modified it, even if they removed the word, that's no longer. That means someone already modified it before they released it. Let's see what we find here. Read and search White House transcript of Trump's first call with Ukraine president. The White House has released a rough transcript of the first phone call between President Donald Trump and Ukraine Zelensky. Okay, so here's the full phone call that we can read. Subject: participants. Date: the president. Let's congratulate you. Job well done. Good to hear you. Thank you very much. It's very nice to hear from you. I appreciate it. Congratulations. That was an incredible election. Again, thank you so very much. And you can see I tried very hard to do our best. We had a great example. I think you will do a great job. I have many friends in Ukraine who know you and like you. I have many friends from Ukraine and they think, frankly, expect that you win. And it's really an amazing thing that you're done. So here's like an insert that they put: cautionary memorandum to the conversation is not verbatim transcript of a discussion. The text in this document records the notes and recollections of situation room duty officers. Okay, so see, this is not a transcript. That's the problem that they're gonna run into. Give me a second. I guess in a way, I did something similar. We're making tremendous progress in the U.S. We have most tremendous economy ever. I just wanted to congratulate you, President Zelensky. Let's just see what Trump is saying. Well, it's very nice. I'll look into that. Give us date in a minute. We'll have great representatives. One more than one from the United States will be with you on a great day. So we will have somebody at a minimum at a very, very high level, and they will be with you. Really incredible day for an incredible.
Yeah, and that was supposed to be the vice president, but
That guy has Trump has the vocabulary of a sixth grader. Wait, so who's
uh,
supposed to be the vice president right here?
so the vice president was
Yeah.
supposed to go to the inauguration, but that did not happen.
Okay.
They sent them
You're right,
someone
and they
instead.
said that that's as a, okay. So give me a second. Let me finish reading Trump's because I want to get to the part where that they have him on. So it says, "Well, I agree with you about your country, and I look forward to it. When I owned Miss Universe, they always had great people. Ukraine was always very well presented. When you're set and ready, I'd like to invite you to the White House. We'll have a lot of things to talk about, but we're with you all the way." Very good. We'll let you know soon, and we will see you soon. Regardless, congratulations, and please say hello to your Ukrainian people and your family. Let me know that I send the best regards from the country. Take care of yourself in a great speech today. Take care of yourself and see you soon. Oh, that's beautiful to hear. That's good. I could not do that in your language. I'm very impressed. Thank you very much. Wait, so where is the hint or the Trump implying that he was going to withhold defense aid for in exchange for him looking into Biden?
Yeah, I don't see it
Uh,
there. Did you
it,
miss it, or no? Didn't you?
sorry, this may be the first phone call. There may be a number of phone calls. There's nothing here about aid or anything. Search. Nope. Oh,
No, it was like a favor was the thing that he. We
okay.
need you to ask you a favor, but
All right, let's see if we can find it. Favor. No, this may not be the letter. Let's see. Okay. I want the whole transcript. Okay, this looks like it's. Is it the same one? Let's see. Let's see. Favor. No favors. Oh, favor. Okay. I would like to do us a favor though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say crowd strike. I guess you have one of my I have you one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have an attorney general call you on your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it. As you saw yesterday, the whole nonsense ended with the poor performance by a named Robert Mueller and incompetent performance, but they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it, if that's possible. This is hinting at the Russian meddling or the potential
Mm.
meddling in the Ukraine that you were mentioning, right?
Yeah.
That's the only favor. The word appearance or favor. What about aid? No aid. Do you want to read the whole thing? This looks like a different letter.
Yeah. So I think this was a conversation that sort of gets at the baseless investigation that was referenced earlier. And I think the other thing to add is the role that Rudy Giuliani, the president's private attorney, is has played in the background with all the investigations. So perhaps not mentioned here directly, but I think what some of the well, actually, Ambassador Sutherland was one who was or is the ambassador to the EU, but somehow was assigned to work on the case as well.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy Giuliani, Secretary of Energy Perry, and who was the other guy? There were the three amigos, they call themselves, working on the Ukraine policy, and all three of them, according to his testimony, did not feel happy about Rudy Giuliani being involved and sort of pushing the Hunter Biden investigation. So I think that's the other piece of it, like going outside of the diplomatic channels to ask for
Yeah.
a favor for the president. So again, so I know that I believe the intelligence committee is going to be doing a report that's going to be sent to the judiciary committee, and then they're the ones that will then decide whether or not there'll be articles of impeachment. But to your point, like how many of us are going to take the time to read the intelligence committee reports and really get down to fully investigating what's going on? And I think to your earlier question, which was pretty legit, like in terms of why you trust in the community intelligence that sort of misled us in the run up to the Iraq war. So, good point to Shay. But I think that that's what it gets at the heart of a representative democracy like the ones that we have. Like we elect people who we trust are going to be representing our best interest, who are going to be true to us, who are going to let us know both the good and bad, and that then we can make a decision of who we elect. And we also trust that they're going to be running things in a way that benefits us as a country, right? So when there's mistrust, when there's also a lot of other, when you if you cannot trust some of the institutions or the officials who are meant to be there, who are supposed to be representing our best interests, then that's a bad situation, right? So I think that um, yeah, it's complicated, and that one of the best ways for us to and I would say if somebody would want to see dysfunction, that would be one way to do it, right? Through okay, make sure that they don't have a trust of the institutions, make sure that there's a lot of infighting, and that's going to paralyze us to an extent, right? And that's going to have implications to how we can or cannot interact or react to things as a country.
I agree. But when it comes to the representative representational democracy, which we send our representatives, I'm all fine with that. And I would want to trust our leaders and the establishment and our military generals. But apart from trusting them, we should always verify. You need trust and verify. The problem that we have is that
Yeah.
we do trust them, but no one's verifying. And the entity that is supposed to be verifying what they are telling us is the media, our investigative
Well, it's
journalists,
Congress.
and well, Congress as well. But you can see if you could almost put Congress within the problem itself. Yeah, Congress should be checking the military generals, but who should be checking Congress? We can't just appoint people to go and
Which is
represent us, because the people ourselves, we have to be involved as well, because
yeah,
we have to constantly we send them up, we send them to Washington to do something on our behalf for our interest, but we can't just pretend like they're going to go and do it. We have to like verify and stay on them, right, and put
yeah.
pressure on them to do the right thing. And the same way as the media should do that as well. The problem is that in this representational democracy, or representative democracy, the people elect leaders, and then the people forget and go back to their daily routines. And so there's not a lot of involvement. And then we rely on the media to do that check for us, but the media doesn't do the checks for us, because if you remember, the media was the biggest cheerleader, like the New York Times and so forth. They were the biggest cheerleaders trying to get us into war. And so that's why when I talk about someone like a Tulsi Gabbard, she basically, that's what she's saying. She's saying like, hey, wait a minute, we should at least verify some of the claims that these generals are making, some of the claims that were being told before we go into war. So anyway, sorry, that was just uh, I'm agreeing with you. We can leave that for a different conversation, because
No, which is a good point because I think it transitioned us to the next topic that we wanted to talk about, which is the Democratic presidential candidate race, and
you
I
don't
think that's
you don't want to keep reading Trump's letter.
not right now. We can do it offline.
Yeah, we spent too much time, but th- this part's really good. That just quick, because I was reading it while you were talking. Um, when he's telling Germany does almost nothing for you. All they do is talk, and I think it's something that you should really ask them about. When I was speaking to Angela Merkel, she talks Ukraine, but she doesn't do anything. It's actually quite entertaining. Uh, if they do have, because again, these are pieced together from it's not a verbatim transcript, right? So if they have something, they can actually hold them where he is not implying, because if it's all, if it's just if the case is that he implied something based on what people recollect about a call, it's going to be really hard. You need to actually get him on tape and get the actual tape, and that's how you could impeach him. I think the mistake that Trump made is that he probably wanted Giuliani to do all his dirty work. That way, if they were caught, he could just distance himself from Giuliani and fire him and whatever. But then Trump got himself involved. That's the part where he doesn't act like a typical politician. So, anyway, you want to? Sorry, I don't know if I interrupted the segue, but we into the Democratic primary.
No, it's all related because I know earlier in the conversation you said, why go through this process if, in just a few months, uh, there's going to be an election, and that's where, all of us as a country will have the opportunity to decide who stays in the White House or who comes in, which is true. It's a good point, but I think for me, one of the reasons, and I don't know, it's because I'm a political science major, but for me, why the impeachment and the institutions and the process is so important is because it is about the principles. It is about the values that we try to live up to, right? And even if this impeachment inquiry goes nowhere, even if this investigation at the end of the day, even if if they don't find enough to come up to a conclusion, or that the Senate, the Republican controlled Senate, decides not to act upon it, at least there was an investigation. At least there was an attempt to follow the process and the mechanisms that that we have in place to sort of check the different branches of government, to check ourselves, and to make sure that we're doing what's in the best of interest of I mean, not even the minority or the majority, because it also there's a lot of checks and balances in our in our system that protect the minority viewpoint as well. But in any case, like I personally think that it's very important for us to go through this exercise and not just say that, oh, um, there will be just an election a few months from now, because there's a lot of what governs politics, what governs us is precedent. So if you set a precedent that a president can do this type of behavior, or a person can do this type of behavior, then you can go. It's a slippery slope kind of situation. So so that's one of the reasons I personally think that regardless of what the outcome is, there was enough in there to investigate it. And then if the investigation doesn't turn out enough, well, at least we went through the process, and now you have the ultimate um, check on power, which are elections. And I think that now we have, particularly in the Democratic side, because the Republican Party decided not to officially have any I guess primaries. So now we're sort of aimed to decide who's going to be the opponent that Trump will face in the 2020 election.
Yeah, just to reply to your comment, I agree with you. If you want to hold the ideals that the United States claims to have about our democracy and so forth, if you're going to hold Trump accountable for his behavior, then I would like to see consistency and hold every other president and administration accountable for what they did also, right? So we have people saying that the Iraq war was the biggest blunder in our history. You can't just wash away a war that killed thousands of people and call it a blunder. That wasn't a blunder. That was
Hmm.
people that knew what they were doing. They made some of them may have made mistakes, but people knew exactly what they were doing. Why not hold them accountable? Like under Obama, we went into Libya, completely destroyed that country. Was that another blunder? If we're gonna hold Trump accountable for his actions, I want to see every other president held accountable too, because we can't pretend like the problems, and we can't pretend like bad government started with Trump, right? And so I'm not defending Trump. Yeah, go ahead and impeach him, but while we're at it, why don't we also look a little bit closer into what every other previous administration has done? I know we're not going to get into it, but this whole Bolivia crisis, the issue with Venezuela, our meddling in the Middle East, all of that stuff. What? Because we're upholding the ideals of democracy up there? Because you know, um, we've had a few discussions on that.
Yeah.
Well, don't want to get too much into it, but so yeah, so the Democratic election, I have Buttigieg here highlighted because he's the one that's been rising, and then you have Warren and Biden and then Sanders. It's a pretty close race between these four. What do you think? My instinct tells me that Sanders' time was 4 years ago, and I was actually one of the guys that was out there campaigning for Sanders. I was going door to
Hmm.
door because I was excited about him potentially being the Democratic nominee. And this 4 years later, I'm not, because I actually started looking more into his policies and realized that he is essentially not too far detached from the entire establishment, from the way that I see it. The one that I support is Gabbard. Look, you see here all the way down here.
Hmm.
Um, Warren's, my inclination is that they want to push Biden to be the nominee, and when I mean the establishment, the political machine wants Biden to be the nominee. I have a feeling that Warren may get it, but I'm not too sure yet. There's still a lot to go. What did you think about the debate? Did you get to watch it or read about it?
I got to hear a little bit about the sort of how what it went, and some of the analysis, but not too much. I didn't get to watch it myself. But yeah, I think that it's interesting to see how this race is shaping up. I think that it's interesting that Buttigieg, it's sort of seen as the alternative for Biden, in terms of someone who is a little bit more moderate, who is from Indiana, who could potentially bring that which in essence is the white vote, right? But he's also a gay veteran man, and that would be pretty historic if he does win. I think with Biden, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not he's fit to be president. I know he's had some he's misspoken. I know recently there's been the fact that he has a stutter or had a stutter. It's something that now I know his campaign is putting out there, perhaps as a way to say, well, the reason why he sometimes has problems communicating is because of the stutter or the sort of the ongoing issues that he has with that. I think with Sanders, obviously now you have somebody who, yes, he has a broad base of support, but he recently had a heart attack. So unfortunately, his health has become an issue of concern. And then Warren, I think that to your point, she seems to be well positioned, well prepared, but I don't know if there's as much excitement for her as there is for Sanders, and whether or not the country's ready to once again consider a female candidate as president, or to have a female president.
Yeah, and the policies that Elizabeth Warren and Sanders are very closely aligned. I know Warren has come out and has had some ideas for, um, I believe, for revamping the healthcare and also for student loans. And I do know that a lot are seeing her as a socialist candidate, very similar to Sanders. They say socialist because they want to scare people into thinking socialism, not necessarily democratic socialist, which is completely different. But I don't. Between Warren and Sanders, there's at least right now. I admit I have to get more into Warren's policies, but I right now the way that I see them, they're very similar. And maybe 4 years ago, when 4 years ago I was one of the guys. In full disclaimer, I was one of the guys that was saying that there's no way that Trump could win. So I completely
Mm.
underestimated the the economic conditions in the Midwest, and I completely underestimated the backlash against Obama and maybe the hints of xenophobia and racism, and then the nationalistic undercurrent that Trump was able to tap into. So yeah, and by the way, this website 538, they completely missed the call too because they said that Hillary was going to win the election. So
Mm.
I'm not alone in 4 years ago us saying that Trump wasn't going to be elected. What I did say even back then though was that if Trump came in, I didn't see how how things would change drastically. And I think some things haven't changed, but some things have. For example, with the way that they are treating the immigrant caravans, the way that he has like the Navy SEAL that he recently pardoned, the way that he is well the trade war with China. I don't know if a Democrat would have done that. Some people may say that it's a good thing that he started the trade war, but from my point of view, well, it's too early to say. Maybe it is a good thing, right? Maybe it is a good thing that he's standing up for American for the for industry in America. The problem is
Yeah.
that the trade war, all it's tariffs. So essentially, the companies are going to pass that on to the consumer, which is the American. So we don't know how that's going to work out. But what I can tell you right now, though, is that I do think that at this point, a Biden, a Sanders, a Buttigieg, or Warren would be better than a Trump. And that I could
Mm-hmm.
say because I think 4 years ago I was saying that they would be about the same, and in the big picture they're kind of it is, but when it comes to something personal like the immigration issue, the Democrats would be a lot more flexible and willing to be more not lenient but to work in a more um what's the word, not humanitarian,
Humane.
humane, work in a more humane manner, treating the immigrants humanely as opposed to the way that Trump has done it. But look, the one thing that I liked about Trump at some point was that he was saying that he was going to pull us out of the Middle East. He never did. He couldn't because the establishment is too powerful. So see, nothing changed there. So when it comes to our foreign policy, our interventionist policy, neither Democrat nor Republican really are going to give you a change there. But when it comes to
Yeah,
domestic policies, again with healthcare, the skyrocketing student loan debt with students, and then the the healthcare, student loans, immigration, all of that stuff, you will see a improvement with the Democrats. Although the question is still out there how they're going to pay for all that stuff, but it's a different story. They may have to raise taxes.
that's true. But it's interesting that you talked about immigration because I think it was this week that Biden was confronted by a young
Oh,
Latino
I saw that.
about the deportation of over 33 million immigrants, right? So I think yes, that's an important issue,
Under
and
Trump or under Obama? Sorry to
under
interrupt.
Obama,
Yeah, under
under
Obama,
Obama,
because
I'm
yeah, because
sorry.
that's something that a lot of people overlook conveniently. That
Yeah,
Obama,
and
yeah.
and by the way, it looks like you need some juice on your computer.
Hey, it's okay. I'll be good.
and and then the other thing that I wanted to mention was it's interesting that actually Andrew Yang is seen as a candidate that's very popular on social media and other platforms. So he had a little bit of a is having a little bit of a surgency, right? He's
Yeah, you're
surging in
right.
the polls, um, and I think he is interesting, right? He is somebody that I guess is also attracting more of the young of the young vote, and he's a Brown alum.
What year is he? Do you
Good
know?
question. I think he
Like
was
90s
nine.
or yeah, late 90s?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I'll look him up. I'll do some more research. I do know he seems to be in the same ballpark with Kamala Harris, um Klobuchar. I don't think I know this candidate or this one, but
Senator
definitely,
Klobuchar.
yeah. Definitely Booker, Yang, and Harris. I have heard of them. I didn't know that these two other had thrown their name into the race. I know about Gabbard. Mm, you know
Oh
what?
yeah, and then there was Bloomberg and
Yeah, I've been hearing about Bloomberg.
well, the former governor of Massachusetts who actually jumped in the race.
Since you brought it up, the video of the activists, the Hispanic activists approaching and holding Biden accountable because they did shut him down, and they were saying no more deportations. If you pay attention to that video closely in the beginning, when he's essentially shouting at Biden and Biden's replying with the microphone, he is telling him, I can't really make out what he's saying, but I assume he's talking about the deportations under his administration. And Biden, he asked him, "Do you pledge to stop all deportations?" And I thought that Biden's response was like it was a cop out because he tried to hide behind the argument that we need to deport criminals. And like I understand that, sure, if you have criminals, you do want to deport those criminals. The problem is that the definition of criminalizing somebody becomes very loose as well. When it's one of those tricks that they use. For example, they'll say, "Yeah, we need to deport criminals," and then everyone's like, "Yeah, definitely," because everyone's thinking rapists and killers and murderers. But then when the policy actually gets put into place, turns out they are deporting somebody who may have had ended up in jail for like a misdemeanor, that had nothing to do with that person actually having a criminal past. They may just have had something on their record, and all of a sudden, these guys are considered criminals now, and they get deported. But then, from the point of view of the activist, it's kind of hard for him to say, "No, we want you to stop all deportations, including criminals," because then that just makes him look bad. Because, well, what
Yeah,
about the serious criminals? The problem is with this thing is that you can't have a reasonable discussion about this because, well, maybe you could, but not in that forum in which they were
yeah,
confronting him. And unfortunately, a lot of conservatives and a lot of people are going to side with Biden, and it's going to make out some of these activists look bad because it's going to make it seem like they want to stop all deportations, including criminals. Because that's all Biden said. Biden said, "Well, we have to deport." He says, "I commit." I don't remember what his exact answer was, but he said, "I can't commit to not deporting criminals." But then they kept yelling over him, and I thought to myself, like, man, I'm not gonna criticize the guy, the Hispanic guy, because hey, more power to them that they're actually standing up and holding these politicians accountable. Like, who am I here to criticize him because he's actually doing something that I'm not, right? I'm not just gonna sit
Hmm.
here and pretend like, oh, he should have done it this way, he should have done it that other way. But I was thinking to myself, if I were in that position, and if Biden gave me that response, like, what options did he have, or what would I have done? Do you think he could have said, "We're not talking about criminals. You can deport the criminals if you want. We're talking about the thousands, millions of people that you deported that did not have a criminal record." I wonder if that, maybe he did say that. Maybe, but maybe he didn't have a microphone, so we couldn't hear him.
Or yeah, or he could. I think Biden. Yeah, it's a tough situation. I think he could have said, "Well, what I'll do is I'll work hard to bring about comprehensive immigration reform." Right. So I think he could have done said something that was a little bit more advancing his agenda. Right. So because I think to your point, a lot of people view the fact of being here unauthorized is in the United States as a criminal offense enough to be reported deported, right?
Yeah, and under that metric, you can deport all of them then. So,
Hmm.
but see, that's the part that I don't like about Biden. That when he's off the teleprompter, when he's speaking off the cuff, that's what exposes his true ideology. He did exactly the same thing that Trump would have done. He tried to deflect by using something that's politically loaded, like almost like a dog whistle. Oh, well, we have to deport criminals. What do you mean we're not going to deport people? And look, that's not what the kid is talking about. Any reasonable person that wants to have a reasonable discussion about this matter knows that this activist is not fighting for the rights of criminals. But yet Biden chose that as his way of deflecting the attack, or
Hmm.
what he saw as an attack. And that tells me everything I need. Well, not everything, but that tells me a lot about Joe Biden. Because to your point, he could have said, "We're gonna work to make sure that we treat immigrants in a humane manner, and that we seriously look into this." But then again, at the same time, well, he could have also. I don't know if he could have said this, that he was the vice president at the time, that he didn't really have a lot of power. So I don't know. Like, there's no good answers, but he definitely could have said something better than just trying to hide behind the politically charged accusation that, oh, that they're criminals and we have to get rid of them. I
Yeah,
thought that was very short sighted of him, and yeah,
well,
not the
I
best
see your
response.
point, and because I think that the fact that his default was the criminality thing versus, um, so yeah, so I'm trying to, I understand what you're saying, and I think for someone who is from our community, a Latino understands that, like, we're not talking about criminals, but the thing is, like, people outside of our community does do see as a bad influence, and instead of thinking about all of the great contributions that immigrants bring to the country and all the sacrifices, the hard work, they just the assumption is that we're criminals before anything else, right?
Well, well, maybe that's the assumption as a result of all of the Trump rhetoric and the conservative rhetoric. But I would think that most people, unless they're being fed that directly through some medium like news or radio, they wouldn't think that by default. They're thinking
That's
that
true.
because of the political climate that Trump has brought about. And the fact that Biden relied on that because he saw it as an easy way to get out of it, just tells you, it gives you an insight into his character. Like, Obama
Okay.
would have never approached it in that direction. Um, but then again, go ahead.
Good point. No, that's a good point, and but I think then it kind of gets down to, it's really hard to run for president of the United States, right? And I think that not that it's I don't know if it's harder now versus a few years ago where perhaps social media was not around, but I think these are complicated issues. We live in an area and a time where, people are not willing to have a full long conversation about things and ask our questions and reflect and all those types of things. So I think when you think about it, how difficult it is for someone to be able to speak to an issue and respond that way. And to your point, I think there's maybe some people who are just better prepared, better able to think on their feet than others. Like, but does that make them a better person or not? Right. So I think that that's something that is interesting because you cannot necessarily just, in my opinion, just think, oh, this person is such and such just because their first reaction was this. Yes, I mean their first reaction was this, but can they get to a place where, okay, I understand where maybe I have the wrong perspective on this issue. Let me let me let me sort of adjust my comment or do something else. So I think that, yeah, it's hard to be in that position where you have to defend your word and policies, but that's why they want to be president of the United States, because they feel they can handle that.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. And he should be. Yeah, he's not very good at speaking in the moment. He's not quick with his words. But there's also a lot of evidence that that's just naturally how he is, though. Even when he's speaking casually, he makes a lot of gaffes. They're not gaffes. That's just the way that the guy is. He's an old, creepy guy that has some specific ideology, and he tries to hide it while he's on the campaign trail. But try as much as he tries, a lot of his just who he naturally is gets out. And but then they call it gaffes to try to save face. Did you see the part where the activist got really close to him? It was I was surprised that somebody like security didn't rush him,
Yeah.
and claim that Biden uh was being threatened or something, because he was right in his face. But you know what? I'm I don't know what's gonna come of this. My inclination is to say that this is at least good, to show these Democratic candidates that they can't just assume that they're going to get our vote. Like, I vote independent. I don't vote Democrat. They have to convince me to vote for them. First of all, right? So it's not an automatic vote, and they have to work for our vote. Hillary made that mistake. She assumed that just because a whole bunch of people are registered Democrat, that they were going to vote for her. She didn't even bother campaigning in some states, like Michigan and other states. Like, why would you? So this is to put Biden and all the other Democratic candidates on notice that you have to at least come with something, with a plan, like a Julian Castro plan of dealing with immigration in a more humane manner. Now, as politically charged as immigration is, and people are not going to agree with us because obviously we're Hispanic, so they're going to say that we're biased towards it. And I'd say that we just want them treated humanely, in a way that is different from what the current administration is doing, the way they're separating families and so forth. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and I think humanly, and I think also the other piece of it is acknowledging that the reason why there's a lot of things that are wrong in Latin America are because of direct influence and actions by the U.S. And again, not saying that
Mm,
Latin people and Latin leaders don't have uh, things that they're responsible for.
yeah,
But I
speak.
think that there are definitely things that we have benefited, and also the ways that we benefit, we as a society as a whole benefit from the undocumented undocumented labor, right? That's something that benefits businesses, that
Yeah,
benefits
cheap
Social
labor.
Security, all these things. So there's ways that people benefit, and they just acknowledge. It's kind of like similar to how you know people don't want to acknowledge how they benefited from slavery and the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there was free labor and ways that the slavery benefited a lot of people, and then somehow they want folks to get over it, right? Oh
Mm-hmm.
well, get over it.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah.
you know,
Completely
that was so many
dismissive.
years ago. It's like, well, it's important because it's directed to the position and the influence that you currently have, and that community doesn't have, and other communities of color don't have.
And this is a we I don't think we have time to get into this, but because you segued perfectly into it, what you were talking about, the acknowledgement of how our foreign policy in Latin America has led directly to the waves of immigrants coming here. Nobody ever wants to talk about the cause and effect of this. Now we are here in Bolivia supporting a military coup against Morales based on the fact that he was trying to do something to actually help his people and go against the directives or go against the whatever it is that United States had planned for that whole region. Now they ousted him, and now there's a potential for instability, even potentially a civil war if things don't cool down. And guess where all those refugees are gonna go to, trying to look for political asylum if there is a civil war, or if the situation in Bolivia gets even worse, just in terms of the economic crisis. Well, they'll go to nearby Colombia, they'll go maybe to Mexico, but they'll definitely start coming to the U.S. And so the people that don't want the immigrants at their doorsteps, the political refugees, because they say that they're not really political refugees. Well, maybe they should start paying more attention to what their country is doing overseas that is creating the conditions for people to want to come over here. I'm not blaming every single problem of Central American countries and other countries on the US. I'm just saying that that is a factor that plays into it as well. And if we're going to be honest about tackling a problem, you have to look at a problem from the ground up, or you got to get to the bottom of it. You can't just look at the symptom and pretend like you want to treat the symptom and nothing else, and you don't have anything else to do with what brought about that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with Evo Morales, I know he was the first indigenous president of Bolivia. But I do know that even within Bolivia, there's a lot of really racism, division between sort of the indigenous community and those folks who tended to be more like the Spaniard community.
Well,
I
those in
think,
power, the
yeah,
guys that have
exactly.
the power, because they have everything to lose if there is any type of redistribution or any effort to try to like get the wealth and share it more appropriately with the rest of the population, right?
Yeah, and but then the other issue is like how long does he need to stay in power, and why does it become just about Evo Morales and not about making sure that there's other leaders who can step in after 2 terms, 3 terms
Hey
in order
man,
to
we can't go
continue
to.
the.
Yeah, but see, what you're doing is you're going to other countries and trying to impose our system on them. So what if they want to have a president for 4 or 5 terms, right? It's there. It's on them. That's how they
Yeah, it
want
is,
to
but a lot of
rule the
people didn't
country.
want to. A good number of Bolivians did not want to do that, and they saw that as something that was basically leading to to a system that will be more oppressive or corruption, right? So I think, and you got to sort of think about the history of colonization of Latin America. So like, and I just finished watching this amazing Netflix Simon Bolivar. Well, at least I liked it. I know that it's probably a romanticized version of his background, but this is something that we as a continent have been dealing for a while, and so is the question of how long is it too long to stay in power, and when does it become about the individual versus the institutions or the mentality, the ideals that can help a country move forward, right? So I think that.
Well, wasn't he elected though? So here's the thing, right? So he's elected. I know there's always going to be people that are opposing him, and we don't even know if these people that were opposing him are people that genuinely oppose them because they want to stand up for the ideals of democracy, or if these are people that oppose them because they have something to gain by ousting this guy. And if they are people that have something to gain by ousting them, then those are the perfect people that outside influencers like the United States are going to go in and try to support, because it's for their own personal gain. It's not for the ideals, or it's not for Bolivia. And so here you have a guy that may be trying to do something that's good for the country because he's been helping a lot of people. But just because people want to use the language of liberalism, or the democratic language of free elections and presidential term limits and all of that, they're using that language to try to hijack something for their own personal purposes, for their own personal gain. Nothing to do with the fact that they actually want to uphold those ideals, right? And but you have to separate that. And how do you do that? I haven't even begun to like read what's been going on with Bolivia to really understand who the major players are. But I wouldn't be surprised to find that it has more to do with personal self-interest and serving a very small elite group in Bolivia, as opposed to actually some doing something for the betterment of Bolivia that's going to benefit the rest of the people, because that's just usually not how it works.
Yeah, and I think that may be the case, but I think you also have to. I think, and in Colombia and Latin America in general, we've always had this um, caudilismo, no, el caudillo, no. So there's always, and I guess it applies here in the U.S. But I guess my whole thing is, as much as good things as Evo Morales was able to do and can continue to do, I think there's a problem when it becomes solely reliant on that one person who can get something done. So it's more about how do you build a leadership? How do you build a society that can continue that work? Who can do the hard work of understanding the root causes of that inequalities? Because and that's what happens in Latin America. And that's what stopped the war in Colombia of the conservatives and liberals killing each other when they say, okay, 4 years you rule, 4 years we rule. And unfortunately, it was this back and forth of okay, now all the conservatives get the spoils of being in government. Now all the liberals get the spoils of being in government. But unfortunately, you don't get to a place. Okay, how do we come up with a shared vision of how you bring a country forward? And that's a hard process, right? And that's a hard thing. There's so many interests, a lot of them wealth interests, to your point. And there's also the poor people who just want to have the ability to have access to land, to jobs, to education, in order to be in a better location. So I agree with you. Like, he was probably intending, similar to what Lula was trying to do in Brazil, and so many other good leaders have been trying to do. But the problem it just cannot fall on just one individual who has all the answers and who can drive the power, because that's what's sort of happening here in the U.S. Right? A lot of people now see, oh well, it's Trump. It's Trump who can resolve the issues, and whether or not that's true, that's problematic, right? So my whole thing is like, and to your earlier point, is about the citizens taking ownership. Is about the citizens being involved, and really doing what they need to do to um to get their government to do what it is that they think it's the most important thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. The Yeah, the issue in Latin America is very different, because a lot of the, well, not different, but I understand what you're saying, in that there's so many politicians that are in it for themselves, and that's where you get the corruption, the, you know working directly to benefit industries in their sectors. And I'm sure that Evo Morales, he wasn't a dictator. It was the government is structured in such a way that there is a separation of powers. So even within his administration, he had people that were probably constantly trying to undermine him because they
Yeah.
didn't like what he was doing. But it's hard. That's why a national identity and um, no, actually, I don't know. It's really hard. It's hard to say because
Well,
uh,
well,
uh,
the same thing happened here with Obama, right? He wanted to do all these things, and he wasn't able to do them because of the Republican
Right,
Congress and
but that's
Senate.
just
So
policy though, and the corruption in the U.S. is at a different level than it is in countries like Mexico, like Bolivia. I feel like in those countries, it's a lot harder to hold the politicians accountable. It's a lot easier for them to be totally corrupt without
because the
any.
institutions are not as strong,
Yes,
right?
because the institutions themselves are corrupt, and so it's so baked into the system. Maybe part of it based on the legacy of the type of government system that the Spanish built, but that's why it's so entrenched. So when you say someone like Evo Morales, that you want to rely so much on one man, maybe he was trying to do a lot, but at the same time, he probably had people that were supporting him within his administration, as well as people that were opposing him. And I would like to think that the reason why he feels that he wants to stay in power is because he's so constantly undermined by outside forces that if he doesn't retain that power, they're easily going to replace him with somebody that is more ideologically aligned with the power like the United States that is going to undo all of his policies. So I don't know if you read about the woman that succeeded him. In 7 days, she already undid 14 years of policies that he passed.
Yeah, which sucks.
But see that's the fear that these guys have though. That's why they stay in power so long, because they know that they haven't been able to get enough of a coalition. They haven't been able to change the government, that the minute that they're out, all of their policies are going to be undone.
Well, but that's why you need to. Well, that's why it needs to be something that
But
the other fashion also
but 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 but,
supports or
but
believes to an extent, right? So
but let's put you into their shoes, right? Let's say that you see that there's a lot going on in your country that is not benefiting the common person, that all these
mhm.
elite people are the industries, the everything is um exploiting the average person, and then taking all the profit and then either keeping it for themselves, putting it in offshore bank accounts, and then to a certain extent, external countries like the US, and maybe at some point it's going to be China, they're coming in and they're extracting all the natural resources, oil, minerals, whatever it is, they extract them and then they take them. The elite get wealthier, and then countries like the United States get resources for cheap. So you see that all that's going on and that it's benefiting everyone except the common person. Now you manage to actually form a popular uprising where you get into power and you start trying to change things, and then you see that your policies are actually making a difference, but then you're constantly being undermined by those same people that you're fighting to redistribute things in a better way. And then no matter how many policies you pass, you know that these actors are constantly acting against you, and they're just waiting for an opportunity to get rid of you, so that they can go in and just restore things to how they were before you came to power. Now what you would want to do is you would want to form a type of like mobilize the people so that they can get more of those people that are more ideologically aligned with you into the government, so that you can then have fair elections, so that you can feel that no matter who gets selected, they're now going to be more ideologically aligned to your agenda and to your mission. Because if you can't do that, and there's going to be elections, and then somebody else gets elected, some of the people that you ousted, they're just going to undo everything you did. And I'm not saying that's what he did, because from what I can read, it looks like there were elections and he was still elected, which means the people still wanted him there. So if he knows that it's either him or a fourth term as him versus letting the opposition party come in and undo everything and going back to how it was 15 years ago, what would you do in that situation?
well, that's the thing. So I would have hopefully tried to build my the power base, to your point, making sure that not only was I appointing and helping people who thought like me get into power, I would make sure that I identified either the interests or the people with resources that could back me up, who
Well,
could
what if they
say,
what if they didn't back you, and what if you couldn't appoint those people because the news media and the corporations with power that are still manipulating the people are actually spewing propaganda against you,
yeah, and then you will go ahead and ally yourself with similar leaders
like
and leaders in
Venezuela?
the region,
Yeah.
who have resources, who can support you. You would try to create your an organization that supports your agenda and similar agendas. You
Which is
ally
exactly what
yourself
he
with
did.
countries. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's what. But all
But
that
that
stuff
cannot
has.
just be
Huh?
that cannot be just relying on him being on power. He should have
Right.
also continued to, okay, how do I make sure that that there's a number of people who can step in if once I need to leave power, whether it is because I've done what I came to do, or because it just become an opportunity.
Right.
It's become something that I'm it's not, it's time for a change. So I
Right.
don't know.
Right. But you make it seem like the other side has been playing fair all along.
No, no, it's not a fair fight at all. I mean, it's
And so
what we're talking about is the legacy of I mean of going back into time and for us in Latin America and in the United States, colonization and all that stuff.
yeah, and because you got and because people, people want to play lip service to these ideals of term limits, then they automatically say, oh, it's okay, you've served your 2 terms now, because we want to have uh because we want to show the world that we care about our democracy, you should step aside and let the wolves back into government, who are going to devour everything that you did and are going to set back the country back into poverty. So that's the trade-off right there. Just
But you're
because we want.
assuming that if that person, if Evo Morales didn't run, you're assuming that the wolves were getting like
That's
why
exactly
couldn't
what
his
happened.
why
She are
couldn't no that's what happened, but why didn't he have somebody who, if he wasn't running, why? And I mean, and if she was able to step in because she was elected by voters too, right? Because I think she was the president of the Senate, so she has electoral backing as well. So I mean, she has a base of who voted for her, and she was a reason why she was in power.
right,
And
right.
sounded like it was a divided government.
Well, but he had more votes because he got reelected, right?
Yeah,
So if he got reelected and he wanted to do a fourth term and the people elected him to it, just because we want to say no, you already did 4 terms, we have a democracy here. That's exactly what that's the tool that his opposition is using to get rid of him. And it's not because they care about the country, it's because they want to be in power so they can go back to how things were before. And then things will get worse for the common person in Bolivia, because these politicians don't care about them to begin with. That's the dilemma that someone like a Evo Morales faces. How does he root out the corruption and all of the nepotism and all of that in the government when the interests that are there are so entrenched? He doesn't have the money that the elites have, and he doesn't even have. He may not even own the tools for propaganda for his own population. So they are constantly undermining him. So there's only so much the guy can do. Um, and it's not like he said, I'm the dictator and I'm going to stay in power and I'm not going to have elections anymore. He had elections and he was voted in, right? So that's let me read more about it, because
yeah, I
I
have to
could
do
be
the
missing the
same.
mark on a lot of things. This is just I'm extrapolating what I have seen happen so many times in other countries, like especially Latin America. I'm just extrapolating and making a lot of assumptions about what's going on here. But I admit, let me read more about it. I'll try to pick up a book or two, and then we can have a discussion on it next time.
All right,
Cool,
sounds
man.
good.
Thank you. I think we got a little carried away, but I really enjoyed the conversation. I think that it's good to explore these topics, to try to get to the bottom of things. We didn't really get into Black Friday, but we can have a discussion about it after Thanksgiving.
Sounds good. No, appreciate the conversation too, and look forward to the next one.
Sounds good. Okay. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.